Hello everyone! So, today's lecture will be on character design. Now, before we jump into that, we're going to be talking about uh, the poll that we did last time we met. So, the poll was asking which Starburst flavor is the best. Now, first we have pink at 62.5%, then we have yellow at 16.7%, then orange trailing behind at 12.5%, and then lastly we have red at 8.3%. So apparently a lot of you have something against red, and I don't know. Now, announcements. So labs are going to be due a week after they're assigned. For example, if a lab is assigned on Tuesday, it should be checked off by the end of next Tuesday's class. Lab checkoffs will be done in Discord after class in the decal voice chat, and facilitators will move you from a waiting room into the voice chat to get your lab checked off. Discord tag should also be set by the next class, and please let us know if you don't have a Discord. This way we can help accommodate you through Zoom. Now for today's agenda, we're going to have a little role split for our lecture. Programmers and artists will be put in different breakout rooms in order to do different activities. And then afterwards, everyone's going to come back and we're going to assign Project 1 Part 1. And then we're going to assign Lab. Today's lecture is about character design, and this is targeting the artists in our class. So character design is a little foggy. There's not really a strict set of guidelines that tells you what a good character design is. Instead, good character design is usually thought of as any character that makes sense in the context that they're in. And in order for that to work, we're going to be talking about some tips and some things to consider when designing your character. In our overview here, we're going to be looking at the basics of art, the 5 W's, animation, research, and then giving you guys some additional resources that you may like to see. So, the basics of art. Now, the three basics of art are color, dimension, and shape. Color talks about the color of the character, and usually talks about how color influences how people perceive your character, since colors can create little atmospheres and moods surrounding a character. And you want to make sure that the general color matches what you want people to perceive your character as. In addition, you usually want your character to look clean, and so you want to organize the coloration of your character through the use of color palettes and color hierarchy. The color palette refers to the collection of colors that you will be using to color your character, and the color hierarchy talks about the order and how much color you're going to use in your character. For example, a primary color, a secondary color, and then a detailing color. Now the second part is dimensional restraints. We're going to be building video games. In order to create characters for video games, you want to know what the dimensions of your video games will be in order to know the limits of what you should design your character to fit in the game. Now the third part is shape expression. Good character design usually has very exaggerated shapes in order to provide emphasis for the character. You want to evoke an emotional response through visual tactility, and you almost want people to feel sort of the texture of your character. A good way to test the shape expression of your character is through silhouettes. You usually want to take your character design, color it completely black, and then see if you can make out your character through just its shadow. Now moving on, we have the 5 W's, which are who, what, where, when, and why. Who refers to what is the background story behind your character? What is their narrative? What talks about what physical form will your character take in order to reflect this narrative and everything around it. Where talks about what the game's setting and how does that influence the look of your character. While when talks about how does the time that the character is in affect how he or she looks, or it. Why talks about the function of your character in the general game. For example, is your character a lowly grunt bad guy? If so, you might not want to put a lot of heavy details. Instead, make him look generic enough to fit in the background, but also unique enough so that it's called an original character. As opposed to, for example, a main character, which you may want to make look more flashy and much more detailed. Now, moving on from that, usually character design is not just limited to, for example, concept art or just art in general. What you can't achieve in visuals, you can achieve through motion, and this is where animation comes in. Through animation, you can have your character use body language in order to imply different personalities and emotion, and this helps play a huge role in storytelling. For example, over here, we have a robot guy who is sort of bouncing and walking. This kind of gives a sense that he has a sort of a young vibe to him, and that this is sort of a punk kid. And over here, at the bottom of the text, we have a duck in an egg. And this bird in an egg comes out and looks around very nervously, sort of giving the sense that this little bird has a lot of anxiety. And lastly, we're going to be talking about research. Now, research is arguably one of the most important parts of character design, since this is where you're going to be checking the facts and making sure that whatever you design makes sense to other people. So, I want to repeat this again. Be sure to research any logistics behind your character. You want to ensure that the accuracy of your character design is there, and you also want to make sure that your character design just makes sense in general. For example, if you're designing an armored character, how does the armor fit around your character, and where does it make sense to put the armor on the body? For example, over here in the two pictures, you have Kale from League of Legends, who wears this very spiky armor near the abdomen, and this technically wouldn't make sense since this would stab you when you try to move your body. As opposed to Master Chief from Halo, who wears this new type of armor with a lot of little gaps in between each piece, and actually makes sense for him to have these gaps in order to let him do a lot more dynamic motion. And also, now another example is historical setting. If you're creating a game like Ghost of Tsushima in a historical setting, you want to research, for example, what types of clothing would make sense for people to wear. And lastly, it's just general physics. You just want to make sure that everything just makes sense. And here are my final thoughts. A lot of the points covered are mostly suggestions. What you design will depend on the subject at hand. And so, usually the best way to know if your character design is good is to get player or peer feedback. You want to ask friends and family to take a look at your character and see if they can tell what sort of narrative your character has behind them. This way, you can get a sense of if your character design is actually working. And lastly, I just want to remind everyone to be original. There's definitely nothing wrong with pulling inspiration from outside sources. However, it's very important to never, ever, ever copy anyone blatantly. For example, over here, this is a little thing that I found online. This artist usually is trying to draw some hair, and usually instead of copying the hair from, let's say, an anime, uh, he or she just takes a durian and uses the spikes to trace around and create hair. And now here are some additional resources that you may find interesting. For more information about different examples of character design, you should watch TB Sky on YouTube. He covers a majority of League of Legends and Dark Souls character designs. However, these two games have a lot of different types of characters in them. And so, even if you don't know these two games, it's still worth checking out and learning about different types of character designs surrounding different themes. And additional videos that you should check out on YouTube are BAM Animation, and his video is called Good versus Bad Character Design, and Subjectively, whose video is called Designing a Character. Now, moving on, we're going to have a group activity. First, get in groups of 4, and then decide on a thematic character within a specified environment. For example, maybe you want to talk about a royal bodyguard in the cyberpunk universe, or even a genius inventor in the Stone Ages. Whatever you decide, agree on it and discuss different details surrounding what this character would be. Afterwards, once you guys are done, go off separately and draw a concept of this decided character, and try to use what you learned from this lecture. Afterwards, come together and share design with each other. Try to explain to each other why you designed your character in such a way. And then notice how different people have different designs, or if you guys have any similar designs with each other. So now comes the general announcements for everyone. Project 1 Part 1 is going to be due on 9/10. For all programmers and hybrids, you'll be following along with a series of YouTube tutorials to create a game. And for artists, you're going to be creating game assets and animations. Now remember, if you don't make any sense out of this project or this Part 1, don't worry about it. This is only meant for you to dip your toes into Unity and to sort of get used to the program. Now below, here are the links for all the different project parts. And now we're going to assign labs. For this week, programmers will be doing the basic scripting lab. And for artists, you'll be doing the pixel art and the spriting lab. For the pixel art and spriting lab, inside the folder, you'll also find two PDFs, one talking about Photoshop and another one talking about Piskel. These two guides will be talking about different ways that you can create digital art using your computer, specifically pixel art. And lastly, here is the attendance link. Now, that concludes the lecture. Everybody have a nice day, and I'll see you at the next lecture.